Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. They're the ones who's coming up, and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. Na 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 na. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it now, just you and me.
KBLA Talk 1580. Good morning, God bless. It is time for Freedmen Fridays. It's meant to be a comprehensive reparations conversation. We do it every single week around here. All philosophies, all comers, especially those taking action and moving the ball down the field for reparations. And it is certainly an honor to welcome into the space a longtime community organizer and elected official. He created Operation Power, people organizing and working for empowerment and respect. Former city council member for District 42 in New York, and a former assembly member from District 60. We are pleased to welcome in Charles Barron. Good morning.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. Just want to add another thing, and not a former, but still a Black Panther to my heart.
Yeah. Okay. Can you ever be a former?
No, never.
So, having said that, on the ballot it says Democrat, but you are definitely a reparationist. So talk to me about how you came to embrace and understand reparations. Certainly it's been quite some time.
Yes, it has. And first, let me say this straight up off the top. I have a vocation, which is the elected official, but my profession is revolutionary. And I use the electoral arena to gain access to power and to raise consciousness amongst my beloved people of Brooklyn, East New York, grassroots people, to the need for radical, revolutionary, systemic change. You know, oftentimes we organize around the symptoms of a deeply rooted illness called a fatally flawed colonial capitalist system. So even if we get reparations and we free political prisoners, both of which I believe some is happening and will happen, and even if we fight against homelessness and fight to bring crime down, all of those are symptoms of a fatally flawed capitalist system that's creating the poverty in the first place, that's creating unemployment and inadequate health care in the first place. And so we need to really get at the system. Having said that, you know, I've been involved in the reparations movement for decades. And people must understand that reparations is a debt owed. It's a debt owed not only for the enslavement of African people worldwide and in this country, but also for the times of Jim Crow and Jane Crowism in America and the time of the institutional racism that occurs to this day. So we must make a distinction between the debt you owe us, and some say 4 trillion, 6 trillion, whatever the number, the debt that you owe us with the things that we're entitled to as taxpaying citizens out of these budgets across the state. So, you know, when we say we want reparations, then our oppressors can't say, okay, here, take $10 million worth of scholarship. No, we're supposed to have that anyway. When we call for reparations for you paying the debt owed us, your enemy cannot tell you, your state cannot then tell you, okay, this is how we're going to pay you back. and mention something that should be ours because of the tax we pay in these budgets. So I had a bill in New York that called for the community to determine who's going to sit on the Reparations Commission, not the state, as they did in California and in some other places. So we had some, what I call them a sycophants. A sycophant is a person who sucks up to people in power for personal gain. So we have a lot of black sycophants running around here. They brown nose, they kiss parts of the anatomy they ought not be kissing for personal gain and not for our liberation. So they got a hold of my bill when I left the state assembly and went to the city council, and they changed it. So instead of in Cobra and the December 12th movement and the Institute of the Black World, organizations that have been out here for 40 years fighting reparations, and they would pick the Commission of Nine, they gave that power to the state, the governor and the state assembly. But it was my bill that was passed. And so in that bill, I basically said, simple, a crime has been committed, a people have been injured, and compensation is due. So your duty is to determine the amount, the form, and who's eligible to receive it. That simple.
So even though, the bill that you created helped to push forward New York embracing the idea of reparations and creating its own task force, you feel like it was compromised. Do you feel like it was compromised to the point where it's still not an accomplishment? Because it feels important to the momentum of reparations to have more states taking this on.
Oh, yes. No, you're absolutely right. We give credit where credit is due, that is going to build momentum. But you got to also realize there's a thing called co-opting. And you got to make sure that our movement of reparations is not co-opted to the point where you're getting stuff out of a budget that you're supposed to be getting anyway because you're paying taxes to it. And then it's always a question of power. The great equalizer is power. Power is when you are in charge, when you are making decisions to determine the destiny of our communities. Power is when we have control over all of the social, cultural, political institutions that govern our communities. So when you have power, which is why I ran for office, because you get a little taste of power when you're in the city council of New York, the most powerful city in the world, New York of 8 million people, and a budget in New York City of $109 billion, and a New York State budget of $237 billion. We shouldn't be having no poverty. So I think that when you have a little taste of power, then you have the ability to do the right thing. When you concede that power, like in your state of California, they had a whole reparations committee, and I think it was 9 people selected by the governor and the state legislature. They went on out, and these are people selected by the state. Even if they're black and respectable people, regardless, they were selected by the state. They went out and they did all of their meetings and everything and said to California, this is what you should do. And the governor said, well, not right now because we're broke. We don't have the money and we're struggling and all of that. So we got to understand that we have to get seats of power so that we won't have people do what they did to my bill. And you're right, because I'm still claiming victory. Hey, I made them pass a bill. So what? They fixed it, whatever. But we still have a bill. And alongside that bill, we got a Millions for Reparations movement going. And we're going to have meetings and hearings and professors and activists and radicals, revolution. We're going to all come together and say to that commission that the state is setting up that this is our findings and this is our compensation that we're going to send to the state along with what the commission does.
So it's almost like a parallel task force that you're creating.
Correct. And the reason we have to create that is because too many black politicians sell us out. That's why I call them sycophants. They sell us out. And what they do, because I know these politicians who did that, who made the change. We had my bill passed as it was. There's 150 members of the New York State Assembly. 110 of them voted for my bill as it was. So we got it out of the State Assembly. When it got to the Senate, it's 63 members of the Senate, and we had 25 ready for my bill as it was. And then these two elected officials, sycophants, sellouts, traitors to our reparation movement, as far as I'm concerned, Senator Sanders and Senator Comrie, they went to the leader of the Senate leader, Andrea Stewart Cousins, and said, we don't want Barron's bill because we don't like this organization. We don't like that organization. And that's how the whole bill got changed. But everything else in my bill that I had written and did the research with, and may she rest in peace, Sister Viola Plummer, chair of the December 12th movement, was my chief of staff, and we had that passed. So I agree with you when we say at least we got something moving, but we have to be vigilant and intelligent.
Talking with Charles Barron, and when we come forward, I want to talk about how that works, what you see as the way forward with where we are now, and much more. It is a Freedmen Friday on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Did you know one of the best investments you can make? It's in yourself. At My Computer Career, in just a few months, you can start your new career in the high-demand, recession-resistant field of information technology. Isn't it time you invest in you and start a career in networking, cybersecurity, AI, or upskill to boost your current IT career? So get the ROI you deserve at My Computer Career. No experience necessary. Start now at mycomputercareer.edu.
Financial aid is available for qualified students, including the GI Bill.
Are you wet shaving? You'll get razor bumps.
Nah, Pops, I'm good with Gillette Skin Guard. How long you been growing that beard Mama hates anyway?
Since 77. I shaved and got ingrown so bad.
That's why I use the Gillette Skin Guard razor, face scrub, shave gel, and moisturizer. So I don't have to worry about new razor bumps or shaving irritation.
Gillette Skin Guard, huh? Your mama's gonna love this one.
The best a man can get keeps getting better with Gillette Skin Guard. Buy now at a retailer near you.
Some days I cover up because of my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. Now I'm hitting the road with clearer skin thanks to Skyrizi, Risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection for adults who are candidates for systemic or phototherapy. With Skyrizi, 3 out of 4 people achieved 90% clearer skin at 4 months. And Skyrizi is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
Thanks to Skyrizi, there's nothing on my skin, and that means everything. Ask your doctor today about Skyrizi, the #1 dermatologist prescribed biologic in psoriasis, and visit skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKY-RIZZI to learn more.
To help combat climate change, LADWP is helping neighborhoods have better access to electric vehicles by awarding nearly $130 million in EV rebates to customers just like you. From big savings on used EVs to building new charging plazas, LADWP is charging ahead to help all Angelinos experience the benefits of EVs. Get rebates of up to $4,000 for a used EV and $1,750 for a charger. Learn more at ladwp.com/EV. That's ladwp.com/EV.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
And we're talking with iconic New York Councilmember, Assemblymember, and Black Panther Party member Charles Barron. And you're mentioning how you started your bill with one plan in mind, and that it was modified in a way that you weren't happy with, taking the selection of that task force out of the hands of the community and putting it into the hands of the state, and notably
Correct.
the governor, right?
who's clueless. But go ahead.
And also not black.
Well,
and
hello.
and giving her that, and and you mentioned our governor here in California saying, well, reparations is not just about money, but then we pushed back really hard, and he kind of pivoted back to what you said. Well, our budget ain't great. Da, da, da. That said, money is not dead here because as you're describing, it's a process, right? It's not we got our bill, we get our check. We do have a bill right now that's working its way through the legislature by Senator Steve Bradford that would set aside 6% of all incoming rainy day funds to a reparations fund to start putting money aside for whatever other bills pass. And there is another bill on the table to create a Freedmen's Bureau, also Bradford. Some of the other stuff that, as you've mentioned, may fall into the category of racial equity or stuff we should have anyway and may not strictly be reparations. Doesn't mean it's bad, but you mentioned that, that distinction. So I want to ask you why you think it's so important to make that distinction between what is actually reparations and what is either, decent policy or stuff we should have anyway.
It's very important to make that distinction so they don't get over. So they don't get over thinking they pay in reparations, a debt owed for our enslavement. We were the commodities, as they saw us, that built this capitalist system. Remember how this country started. They had 13 colonies. And the reason why they didn't have no revolutionary American Revolution, that was American rebellion against England, who wanted to continue to colonize them. And so they wanted their independence from England. And they wanted it because England was abolishing slavery, because they were getting beaten down in the Caribbean and other places. And the 13 colonies wanted to continue slavery because that was the basis of the capitalist economy. It was our labor and the theft of land from the indigenous people. So come on now. You can't tell us what the compensation is going to be. We have to be the determinant factors of that. And I would say straight up, that, land is a fundamental thing. Malcolm said land is the basis of freedom, and that the kind of capital that we need to develop stuff is important parts of this compensation. And right now, so that we don't even have to let Biden off the hook. Remember Biden? I got your back, black people, because I know you took care of me. Well, Biden, right now, tonight, he could set up through executive order a commission on reparations. He doesn't have to go through Congress with, H.R. 40. He doesn't even have to go through that. He can set up a commission tonight and say that this is what I believe should happen for black people. So,
but what I mean,
are great. Mm-hmm.
Do you think he would see that as election kryptonite? I mean, there's a lot of. It's hard for me to imagine any politician from a mainstream party running for office signing anything on reparations.
Well, first of all, if you want to talk about kryptonite, poverty is kryptonite. Unemployment is kryptonite. Miseducation is kryptonite. Inadequate health care is kryptonite. Health care would he consider something kryptonite? The bottom line is that that's what we are due, and we should put the pressure on black politicians. This is ironic. When, may he rest in peace, John Conyers' bill, H.R. 40, was in the Judiciary Committee for decades. And when we got a black president, we got Democratic control of the Congress, and he, John Conyers, was head of the Judiciary Committee where his bill was, they never brought it forth. So, we have a problem with neo-colonialism. The new way to colonize us is to put black faces in high places to espouse the same white policies and system of capitalism that the whites do. So we have to stand strong and not be worrying about something being toxic or kryptonite. But for him, look at the kryptonite he's creating for himself by sending bombs to Israel to kill Palestinian babies, if you want to talk about kryptonite. So, we can't be overly concerned about that. We got to unite real black elected officials to stand strong for our people and not engage in rugged individualism, their personal advantages over the liberation and well-being of our people.
Let's go to the phone. We've got Cindy calling from Inglewood. Good morning, Cindy.
Thanks for taking my call again, and thank you, Mr. Barron. Is that right? Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah, we do need an executive order, I agree, signed right now from our president, because he told us that we were the soul of America. But Dominique, I want to piggyback on the workplace and our findings. That young man that called, the root cause of the problem is the reason why I really shoot for the Black Freedmen Bureau to take up the cause and give us a hotline established is because we need a defense mechanism in the workplace. Because what he just experienced is a serious, serious concern, and we need legislation at our bureau. We need a hotline established because he would have been able to get resources. He would have been able to send a detective out, investigators, lawyers, and that's the problem a lot of us are having when we talk on the grassroots level. Dominique, a lot of the ladies and gentlemen are saying the same exact thing, that we're not being taken, our grievances are not being taken seriously. So I say, this is a form of denying him a right to take care of his family, and he's not able to do that. But if we had that Freedmen Bureau hotline, he can go to the hotline, and we can get bills passed. So this is workplace organized domestic terrorists is what I call it. And that behavior needs to be criminalized so that he can take care of his family. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, that Freedmen Bureau being established, and we need defense. We have a right to defend ourselves. And we need some boots on the ground.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that bill has made it out of committee. As far as what I know so far here in California, we had a caller earlier, Mr. Barron, who was talking about being targeted by their own union, which is a black person in a predominantly white union facing discrimination, and Cindy is drawing a correlation and saying maybe there could be some help through a Freedmen's Bureau. That person actually, if they're in the city of LA, could go to the LA Civil Rights Department. But how do you see that?
Well, first of all, that's happening all over the country, where the union movement has turned more towards getting stuff for their workers than they should, as opposed to opposing the system. But black people, black workers, the black working class, we have a black trade union in New York City. We need to form unions amongst ourselves. We have a neighborhood union in East New York, and when we're not getting satisfactory through a union that you're paying dues to. So it's, at some point, you got to become a self-determinant people, and at some point, you got to, once again, get power. Power is the great equalizer. Racism becomes irrelevant when you have power and control the destiny of your union, start your own, or in fact, make sure that unions that you are involved with, that you have enough muscle inside the union and support outside of it to make them do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly, seek positions of power, be elected within our own unions, recruit others to come in, or as you say, if necessary, start our own caucus or our own representative body. We just have 30 seconds here before news, traffic, and sports, and we'll continue the conversation with Charles Barron. It sounds like, I'm not against that, but it sounds like that is anti-discrimination work, which is part of repair, right? It's part of repair of Jim Crow and the legacy of that. Is it directly reparations? Could be. I want to get your comments on that. But also I want to talk about the way forward in New York. Like, what do you see next? And how can this bill and your parallel body succeed given the structure that you have now in reparations in the state of New York? I'm Dominique DiPrima for KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A federal judge is denying former President Trump's bid for a new trial in E. Jean Carroll's defamation lawsuit. Judge Lewis Kaplan said that the over $83 million in damages were not excessive and that Trump's comments when denying Carroll's claims that he sexually assaulted her in a department store in the 1990s endangered her health and safety. Judge Kaplan noted that his continued attacks against her and her credibility derailed her career as a columnist and author. The vice president is making a return visit to Atlanta, Georgia. Kamala Harris is planning a stop Monday to kick off what's being called the Economic Opportunity Tour. Harris is specifically expected to discuss small business investments and minority-owned businesses. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Visit Chevrolet of Montebello for spring savings. Lease a 2024 Chevy Trax for $249 per month or a Chevy Equinox for only $199 per month. Visit ChevroletofMontebello.com for details. Together, let's drive.
At Chevrolet of Montebello.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A painful reality has made its way to Lakers Nation. The Lakers just aren't good enough to beat the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets won by 7 at Crypto.com to take a 3-0 lead in the best-of-7 playoff series. This is the first time in LeBron's 21-year career that he's down 3-0 in the first or second round. If the Nuggets win Game 4 Saturday, the Lakers are done for the season. The Nuggets have beaten the Lakers 11 straight times, including 7 straight times in the playoffs. What is up with D'Angelo Russell? In Game 2 at Denver, Russell dropped a career-high 7 3-pointers. Last night, he couldn't bust a grape. Russell was 0 for 7, including 0 for 6 on 3-pointers. He was scoreless the entire night. Not a good stat line for Russell's resume when the Lakers front office decides whether or not to bring him back next season. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
My ride smells just right, just right, just right, just right.
Y'all gotta try that Febreze car.
Just right, just right, just right. Yeah. La 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 la. With up to 40 days of consistency, all over Febreze car clips right on your vent. You know my car's my happy place. Keep that smile on my face. When it smells just right, just right, just right. Yeah. Breathe happy Febreze. La 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 la.
Getting your biggest tax refund from Jackson Hewitt can lead to some spirited reactions.
Jackson Hewitt!
Jackson Hewitt is so sure they'll get you your biggest refund that if they don't, you get your money back plus $100.
Jackson Hewitt!
Switch to Jackson Hewitt and we'll beat what you paid last year, even if you filed online. Ain't nothing to it. Switch to Jackson Hewitt and pay less for tax prep, guaranteed. Proof of prior year payment required when filing. New clients only at participating locations through April 7th. Terms at jacksonhewitt.com.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally, but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online at hims.com/joy. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation to determine the ED medication that's best for you, discreet shipping if prescribed, a 100% online process, and a range of treatment options, including trusted generic alternatives to the name brands, at up to 95% off. ED is personal, and at Hims, so is treating it. Just go to hims.com/joy and get connected to a licensed medical provider online for free with zero copay, no expensive appointments, and no awkward face-to-face conversations. To start your free online visit, you need to go to this exclusive address, hims.com/joy. That's hims.com/joy for your free online visit. hims.com/joy.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio, KBLA Talk 1580.
And I want to remind you, Los Angeles, if you're ready to boost your business, go to the LA Coliseum. That's Monday, April 29th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can be the first to find out all about the free small business support from LA County, the City of LA, and Supervisor Holly Mitchell. It's all free. And you can register right now at lacountyemi.com. That's lacountyemi.com. It's a Freedmen Friday around here. And we are talking with Charles Barron, the well-known New York City Councilmember, Assemblymember. He says his profession is revolutionary and became a member of the Black Panther Party in the 1960s. We have folks in the chat with some conversation that we'll get to and have you address. But first I want to ask you, the bill that you started has now led to the state of New York having its own reparations task force. You say you have created, or you're creating, a parallel reparations body that's doing its own study, making its own recommendations to influence or, more the New York task force. But what do you see as the way forward for the state?
Well, first of all, the state has to acknowledge New York City was the second largest slaveholding city in the Union, only second to Charleston, South Carolina. We have to realize that the up-south slavery was just as bad as it was down south, and that's what I put in my bill. Secondly, these budgets, even your governor, if you went over that budget, I guarantee you that they have more money than you can even imagine. I know New York State has a budget, as I said, of $237 billion for the state, $109 billion for the city. New York City's budget is larger than 47 state budgets, and New York State budget, I think, is only third to second California and Texas. So they have money. They have a surplus in New York. They were crying about a deficit. We got to cut this, cut that. We got one of the worst mayors we've had in a long time, and Mayor Eric Adams cutting everything in sight, taking care of the police, arresting students on campuses that are protesting Palestinian genocide. So New York State has to stop playing games and say, listen, I have State Hochul. She has $43 billion in addition to the $237 billion, $43 billion in unrestricted reserve funds in the reserve account. Take $5-10 billion out of that and start dealing with our reparations and stop playing games. So we, as people of that state, we go through these commissions, and we'll have our parallel commission, as you mentioned. But I think reparations are going to happen either from legislation, for litigation in courts, or from the streets. We become ungovernable and say New York City's 2-point-some-odd million African people of African descent, 2-some million people of Latino descent, some of them consider themselves black and African, that this state cannot continue to govern without paying us our reparations. Litigation, legislation, or take it to the streets and become ungovernable.
Consider themselves black. I mean, there are Afro-Latinos,
Yeah.
But Rachel Dolezal considers herself black. So then you get into the question, the very fraught question of who should receive reparations and whether or not we are willing as activists and as a world to acknowledge the specific struggles and ancestry of people, of black Americans,
Right. Well, we should not let that issue divide us. I think there's 2.6 million black people in California. I know there's about 3 million black people in New York State. We should not say, well, who's from the Caribbean, who's from the continent? Because remember, as Dr. John Henry Clark said, you're not who you are based upon where the ships dropped you off. You're who you are based upon where the ships picked us up from. And they picked us all up from Africa. So I think we need to not allow that identity question to divide us. And that's why you have commissions. So
yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that, Mr. Barron, but I also think that we're evolving, and I think the young people have a point when, even from the African lens, there's this idea of your ancestors, who are your ancestors? Who are 9 generations of your ancestors? And so when we go to Africa, and I've been blessed to travel extensively in Africa, we don't call a Senegalese, we don't call them an Ethiopian, you know what I mean? We don't call a Wolof a Mandinka. Like, we acknowledge people's specificity of their ancestry. And I think that's part of what's happening here. I hesitate to just dismiss out of hand the younger people who are on this lineage thing and say, well, you're not, because I consider myself a Pan-Africanist, but I also believe in the specificity. Who are your particular ancestors? Where are your people from? You know what I mean? And I think there's, I don't think that's really even African conceptually to dismiss that out of hand.
We're not dismissing anybody. You didn't hear me dismiss
No, I know,
anyone.
but some do. Some do.
Hold it. I understand, but I don't dismiss anyone. My perspective is that the system loves to see that internal fight.
Yeah.
They haven't committed to giving us a damn thing, and we're fighting about who is supposed to get it. Come on. I'm just saying, after they commit to giving us what we deserve, we, through these commissions, through these movements, can have that debate and determine who should receive it. But don't do it before you even got any commitment from the states to give you a dime. You're fighting over a dime that they didn't even commit to give you. So I'm saying, for the sake of unity, let's go in saying, you owe us reparations. We will decide who gets it, how much, what form, but we're not going to have that fight. Do you think the Japanese in 1988, when they got reparations from Ronald Reagan and America, you think they were saying, wait, not all of you Japanese were born here. Some of you were born in Japan. Some of you were not interned. They gave $20,000 to each Japanese that was interned in 1942 because they had that internment where they rounded up all of them and put them in concentration camps, and another $500 million to their ancestors, the descendants. No one argued about who's Japanese, who isn't Japanese, what Japanese should get and what Japanese shouldn't get. They didn't do that. Jews didn't do that.
Well, I mean, I actually,
yeah. But when it comes to us,
well, I actually,
we have this public argument, and when nobody has committed a dime.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I have actually interviewed Ron Wakabayashi, which was one of the Japanese Americans who pushed for those, and they had their own divisions too. They were, some people who thought it was shameful to be even there with a handout asking for reparations within that community.
That was true,
and they overcame that. They managed to overcome it. Yeah.
True, but they didn't have no divisions in terms of who they are. They may have had some divisions.
Well,
over
they weren't enslaved either.
They were interned.
Yeah, but I mean, when you talk about divisions over who we are, we have a more challenging history than anybody on the planet, probably, or most about it, just about anybody. Yeah.
This is why we got to keep it as simplistic as possible to get the reparations from the states, and not get into internal divisive, arguments.
Okay, so, oh man, this thing is scrolling faster than I can keep up with your comments because I have a tiny little laptop. But somebody, and I'm sorry, I can't see your name right now. Somebody said, just as the Black Panthers upended the status quo, the younger grassroots reparationists are upending the establishment Black organizations in the 21st century. And someone else said that they felt like the younger generations are being left out of the conversations when it comes to...
Well, we can say this in New York, that we have a whole host of young people from the inner cities, and Bethlehem, right here in my beloved East New York. We have hundreds of young people that are supporting. We're all together. We're not doing a generational thing. We are united around the question. One, a crime has been committed, the people have been injured, compensation is due, and we will determine how much, what form, and who receives it. That's what we united around. The young people are leading a lot of our movements in New York. So it's not just the older generation, but even the younger generation, whether it's the Malcolm X grassroots organization, the Operation Power, our group, half of our group is young people leading the charge. So we have a unification between young people and our movement.
The forensic accountant says that reparations must include the freeing of all political prisoners and the removal of those who are still on most wanted lists. What do you think about that, Mr. Barron?
Absolutely, unequivocally, absolutely. As a matter of fact, once again, it's important to get in positions of power. I was a New York State Assemblymember, and I brought before the State Assembly, particularly the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus, the case of Jalil Montecum, Black Liberation Army member, who was in for 40-some-odd years, Herman Bell, Black Liberation Army member, who was in for 40-some-odd years, and Seth Hayes. I got them to support a letter calling for their release to the parole board, and all three of them are out. And I'm not saying that we did it by ourselves. We had a Jericho movement that's been around for like decades, but there is a correlation, if not a causation, between that letter that came from that body to their release. And they're out now, so I couldn't agree with that more.
Talking with Operation Power's Charles Barron of New York, and continuing the conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
To help combat climate change, LADWP is helping neighborhoods have better access to electric vehicles by awarding nearly $130 million in EV rebates to customers just like you. From big savings on used EVs to building new charging plazas, LADWP is charging ahead to help all Angelenos experience the benefits of EVs. Get rebates of up to $4,000 for a used EV and $1,750 for a charger. Learn more at ladwp.com/EV. That's ladwp.com/EV.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone, and should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month. If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your Senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
It's time for California Community College's Black Student Success Week. This week-long event, held April 22nd through the 26th, is an opportunity to focus on innovative approaches to ensuring Black and African American students succeed in their educational pursuits. Black Student Success Week 2024, building a better future together. The urgency is now. For more information, visit blackstudentsuccess.com. That's blkstudentsuccess.com.
Pizza's here. Oh, great. I'd love some, but I'm worried about my stomach issues.
If you're worried about having diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose, oily stools, it may not just be stomach issues. It could be a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and talk to your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
We used to argue about whose turn it was to clean the gutters, but then I had Leaf Filter gutter protection installed.
Wait, I told you Leaf Filter had free inspections and estimates and a lifetime guarantee.
Meaning we never have to argue about whose turn it is to clean the gutters again.
But I visited leaffilter.com/beacon first.
No, I did.
It doesn't matter who. Visit leaffilter.com/beacon to schedule your free gutter inspection and get up to 30% off today.
See representative for warranty details. Promotion is 20% off plus a 10% senior or military discount. One discount per household.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate meets a scholarly match.
Talking with Charles Barron, a Black Panther Harlem branch party member, also New York City Councilmember, New York Assemblymember. His bill was the foundation of what is now the New York Reparations Task Force. We are seeing momentum, I feel. I remember, and I say this all the time, I used to talk with the late Dick Gregory a lot about reparations on other radio shows I had, and he said it'll take 50 years. That was about 15 years ago. I think we've seen more progress than I certainly ever expected we would, than Mr. Gregory expected we would. What do you find most encouraging about where we are now?
Well, what I find most encouraging is just what you said. I've seen the reparations issue get front and center. It's right at the front. Even when Bernie Sanders was running as a socialist, it was put before him, and he was against reparations.
He was.
Force him to come around. They're making Biden talk about it. They're making each state talk about it. In the Caribbean, they're talking reparations against England, and in Africa, of course, reparations, against colonialism, former colonialism. Most of those were in NATO, the countries of NATO. So I think we're on the move. I think it's moving forward like it has never been before, just like the call for revolution around the world. The Sahel region and Africa has risen up, and Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger, and the young people, as you mentioned, young people rose up and say these neo-colonial black puppets of France and the United States got to go. France out of Africa, U.S.
Of course,
out of Africa.
now they get Russia coming in the back door, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, when we say
and
people
China
form relationships, America has a relationship with Russia.
Yes,
America
we do.
has a relationship with China. So when our people decide that they're going to be independent and form relationships with other countries, it's not like these countries are going to control them. And remember, during the 60s, as you may know, because your father, Mary Baraka, was a good friend of mine, but during
Rest
the
in peace,
60s, the 60s, most of the liberation movements was supported by Russia and China. It was America.
It's not today's China, though. I mean,
no, it ain't today's.
Oh,
China,
nor today's Russia. Yeah,
but I can say this much: that they have never colonized us. They're trying to do economic colonization now and control some of the land. So, but African people are sharp. African leaders are smart. Some are sellouts and neo-colonial puppets.
Ooh, yeah.
But there are others. that are very, very sharp.
We got to do a show about that one day. Yeah.
Mutually beneficial relationships is legitimate in the international arena.
You mentioned the Caribbean, and I do hear this a lot in our chat today and other days, that CARICOM is not including Black Americans in their reparation movement, so why are we including them in ours?
Well, first of all, the people who are citizens of those countries in the Caribbean, and if you're from America, you are included. Just like
if you're a citizen
here,
right.
Right. Same here. If you're a citizen here, you are included. And some countries don't include, some do include. But once again, I think that's an argument that we can make and should have, but we just got to be cautious not to be divisive. I heard that before, and a lot of people don't even have a valid argument to prove either way. But when we get into those things, and we should, and we can, and people will, But some of us, and when we say young people, there's no young, monopoly. There's no one young people group. There are a lot of young people who believe that all African people, all black people, all 2.6 million in California, all 3 million as identified in New York should get it. There are young people who are pushing that and who are pushing back on the lineage talk. So it goes both ways. And, my thing is I'm not getting into a big argument over that. People who argue that, they could argue during the commission hearings and rallies. But the bottom line, we should unite to get reparations because the state ain't offering you nothing at this point.
Well, you just raised a whole bunch of questions. We could do another hour, but just to finish up strong here, what do you think is the role of state, local, county? Because really, I mean, when we're talking about big dollars and big debt, it is at the federal level and the corporate level, right?
I think every state should set aside money to compensate the enslaved Africans that were the foundation of the economy of that state, and that is just about every state in America. I think the federal government, see, they don't have problems with that. There's a $33 trillion national debt. Do we have anything to do with that? Where did they spend that $33 trillion? But, your taxpaying dollars is paying that debt off. So if we say the debt is $6 trillion, just throwing a number out there, then you should put down payment on it. We'll take $50 billion this year and work toward, you paying off that debt, just like you pay off the debt. And I have to pay off a debt that I didn't even accumulate. When 1988, I was still born. People had to we had to pay our taxpaying dollars to reparations for the Japanese. In New York City, in the city council that I was in, they put a couple of $1 million aside for Jewish victims of the Holocaust, and New York City had nothing to do with the Holocaust. So if they got money for all of this, they should have money for us. We shouldn't even have to have a commission. The state should come together and say, look, without the enslaved Africans, there is no America. Europe was dying. Without the enslavement of the African in 1400, there would be no Europe. So they should just say, hey, listen, how much do we owe you? What form do you want it? And let's start taking care of it in these states that have these multi-billion-dollar budgets with surpluses.
Yeah, and we consistently hear that reparations sort of conflated with the idea of welfare, some kind of handout, some kind of affirmative action.
No handout.
You clearly stated it was a debt. Do you tie that to the Reconstruction, to Special Order 15? What is your...
Oh, that's a good one. We should really study Special Order 15. I'm glad you raised that because this Tunis Campbell, who was the black that was the head of the Freedmen's Bureau then, do you know back then when they were talking 40 acres and a mule, they actually got the Sea Islands, and he took about 500 of us to the Sea Islands, and that land he cultivated, and they started their own government there, their own militia to protect them from white racists. That happened during Tunis Whiteman's time, and then, of course, Jackson came in, the racists who undid all of that because, the Confiscation Act, when they confiscated the southern land, they were giving some of that to us because the Civil War, as Lincoln said with his racist stuff, would not have been won without the African soldiers or colored infantry, as they called them back then. So I'm glad you mentioned that because that was a very, very important time. And people should remember Callie House in 1898. Sister Callie House, she said, listen, I can't compensate or accumulate all of the wages you owe me, but pay me a pension for our enslavement. And she had the ex-slave pension fund. Queen Mother Moore always said, pay me my reparations. Had 1 million pieces of petitions sent to Kennedy. And in 1763, Melinda Sutton actually went before the court in Massachusetts and said, this slaveholder's property that you're debating over, I was enslaved on it for 30 years. I want some compensation for me and my daughter, and she got it. It wasn't a lot. It was some pounds and shillings or whatever they called them back then. So there is a history of reparations. And the December 12th movement by Ola Plummer, may she rest in peace, they went to, in 2009, they went to the International Conference on Racism and said they got the transatlantic slave trade to be considered a crime against humanity. So now it has no limitations on that, statute of limitation on that. We can take them to court. So there's a lot of positive things, as you mentioned, beyond with this conversation you and Dick Gregory had. Things are moving forward. We just got to make sure we don't get into debates that push us backward.
Charles Barron, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciated the conversation.
Phone lines are wide open if you want to chime in. KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A federal judge is denying former President Trump's bid for a new trial in E. Jean Carroll's defamation